Some of the logistics about tonight, I guess we're jumping in to get started. And Dr. Harris here, McPhatter-Harris, will do most of the talking tonight as she takes us through our lessons. But just some introductions. My name's Amy McNamara. I'm the Associate Superintendent here in Acalanes. I've been here for about, it's my 7th year. We welcome you and want to engage with you tonight in these conversations around race and equity and other markers of identity that we're going to be discussing with students this year. Tonight, we have a webinar format, knowing that this would be of high interest to people. We're going to walk you through the lessons tonight that we've developed, lesson 1 and lesson 2. Those are the only lessons we've developed so far. We have ideas about the other ones that we've shared publicly and we'll share with you. But please know they're subject to change depending on the needs of the schools. Like all good teachers, I think we want to be responsive to the needs that we see in schools and maybe stop and address something that we feel is coming up and needs to be talked about. So we have an outline, but we don't have a binder of lessons or a book or a company that we use. We develop these as we go. So what we're going to do tonight is I will explain briefly to parents what the purpose of the lessons is, what our outline is, and then Dr. McPhatter-Harris, our Director of Student Support, Equity, and Inclusion, will walk you through lessons 1 and 2. After lesson 1, we'll pause and I'll take the questions that come up in the Q&A. After lesson 2, we'll pause, take questions that come up in the Q&A. We're hoping to be done. We have a hard stop at 7 o'clock, so we have 90 minutes for this. It won't take us that long to go through the lessons, so we really want to make sure you feel heard and that your questions get answered. And then we will, record. This is being recorded. It's being recorded right now, and we'll post this as well. So if you need to go back and remind yourself of something, you're able to do that. Dr. Harris, am I missing anything that you can think of?
No, just even though that we're not going to have you do breakout rooms and do the activities full on, as we go through the lessons, my hope is that you can start to reflect and start to go through some of them on your own. That will help you to think about what kind of questions you may have as we finish each lesson. You're muted.
I always do that, even now after a year of Zoom. I will go through and kind of monitor the Q&A as we go. If I need to interrupt Dr. Harris, say, hey, there's a quick question about this, I will. But otherwise, we'll take a break between lesson 1 and 2. As I note questions and we try to answer them. So I'm just making sure I've got all my tools here so I can note down the questions. But let me start by just kind of taking you through kind of what our lessons are about. So as you can see here, what we are doing is these are the cohort lessons. Our goals for these lessons our number 1 is to build community with our students. We've been away for a year and a half, and coming back into full person school has been a challenge for many of our students and just a new experience for some of our students who haven't really been on a high school campus and they're juniors, sophomores. So we want to build community. So the lessons are deliberately done in a 4th period class. So it's with students that they know. One of the most important things that we want to do, and I hope this resonates with a lot of the parents that are here in the audience tonight, is we want to help students understand that there are multiple perspectives in our community. And those are a range of beliefs about that we hold. Sometimes there are family beliefs, there are religious beliefs, there are beliefs about the way the world works. And we really want students to dig into the fact that it's that multiple perspectives that is what gives us a wonderful, diverse classroom setting that we want to. It makes us richer as people to hear other people's perspectives. It's part of learning and growing. We certainly want students to practice their listening skills. So that is something that we certainly want to work on, is listening skills with students. This is one of the harder things that we're working on, is to get students to deeply listen to one another so they can understand where other perspectives are coming from and how those perspectives were formed. We want them to practice understanding that people's experiences help form their beliefs, that form their opinions about things. So we want people to be able to feel comfortable enough to understand the different experiences that students have had growing up in our community, growing up outside of our community, being new to our community, having been a resident maybe all their lives of Walla Mirinda here. We want students to gain a global perspective of events and situations, understanding that there's many ways to view something and take a look at things. We obviously, one of our primary goals is that students feel safe and included, and that students have fun. One of the biggest things that we know is that we want to build community. We want to practice social emotional learning and build some connections in these classes. We talk about norms and rules, and Dr. Harris will take you through that, so that students feel comfortable in these spaces and they're getting some of their needs met in the cohort. Our next one, kind of depending on the need. So these are our topics, and I put a disclaimer out early that, we don't know where we're going to go. We've built 2 lessons. The first one is building community, and the second one is the multiple perspectives on race. And that's really about Dr. Harris will take you through it. I'm not going to give any spoilers about it. In January, we want to talk about intersections of identity. We want to talk about gender in February, behaviors maybe in March from our places of privilege, our places of oppression, how we all show up depending on our life experiences. We want to address classism in the district. That's something that the students have talked about with us. So we're not quite sure how these topics are going to go or what order we're going to do the next lessons on. One of the things that Dr. McPhatter-Harris does is after these lessons, she meets with the leadership classes and leadership students. We also meet with students who've been involved in equity work for the last few years to get feedback on the lessons, how to go, what do you need? We meet with teachers. We certainly take in parent perspectives, and it was parent perspective that really helped us shape the next lesson that we're going to be talking about tonight, lesson 2. So we're trying to get a lot of voices in and then develop what we need from there. Like I said, as a good teacher, you don't have all your lessons planned out through the school year because you have to go at the pace that the class can go. So we really want to make sure the lessons are building community. We're paying attention to things. If we have to revisit things, we'll go ahead and do that as necessary. So with that, Lynna, should I stop sharing so you can share your screen?
Yeah, it won't let me while you're sharing.
Okay, so I've stopped sharing. And with that, we're going to kind of dive into lesson 1. This was the first lesson that we did in September. So I will stop talking and turn it over to Dr. McPhatter-Harris, our director, and then I'll monitor the Q&A so I can make sure questions get answered at the end of this lesson 1 session.
Okay, and I'll pay attention to you to know if I need to pause. Good evening, everyone. And so, Amy, thank you for setting that up. This first lesson is really about building community, because when I checked in with the students prior to even developing this lesson, they mentioned that they did not have the opportunity to build agreements, to build a way that they would feel comfortable, safe, to be vulnerable, and to share and to really dig in. And the other ask that they really had was that they could spend time reflecting and having discussions with each other, because that was something they weren't able to do last year during the lessons. So we slowed the lessons down to allow them to do some reflection, to be able to hear each other. And as Amy said, the goal of this is for each student to know that their perspective is valid. They don't have to change their perspectives. They don't have to change their beliefs. They're able to have theirs and hear others, and that all can be shared amongst each other. So the first one is building community to go deeper with understanding race and other identifiers that impact equity. First is our check-in of name, pronoun, and as they do this, this is when they break up into triad groups so that they can have these discussions together before even diving in. What does equity mean to you? What does a school with a focus on equity look like to you? How is that school different than the one we have now? And how are you willing to be to make that different? so that they can start thinking about what would my part be in this? What is equity and what would it look like? And be able to acknowledge how they want to be seen. What is their pronoun? They do that in a triad activity and then come out and have a large group discussion of capturing some of the themes that came up. Then we introduced the first tool. This tool is called the compass, and this tool will be utilized throughout every single lesson for all discussions. The way that it works is there's 4 quadrants. Believing is really understanding, how my values are, what I see as right and wrong, what my culture, how I am being. So sometimes when I'm thinking about equity, I could be in a place of what are my values around equity? What kind of things are going to be coming up for me in my place of belief and values? When we move to thinking, it's really about the cognitive, the concepts, the intellectual piece. What are the facts? What more information do I need to know to understand this? It's where I'm in my head. The acting is I want to get something done. I am in a place that I'm ready to do something. I'm ready to respond. I'm ready to make it change. And feelings are all about our feelings. Like if I am on this topic and I'm in my heart, I'm feeling anger, happiness, sadness. There's something going on. And being able to understand this compass and being able to understand where I am and each student being able to know where they are with each topic allows them to start thinking about what will help me to get centered. If I'm in my feelings, what can allow me to be centered so that I know where I am when I'm starting to have this conversation with the rest of the triad group. It also allows us to understand where someone else is entering the conversation. If I'm in my feelings and they're in their thinking, we're going to miss and have miscommunication. So how do I meet the other person where they are so that we can be in dialogue together? So throughout all the lessons, we come back to this compass so that students become able to just use this without seeing it. This just becomes a way to get regulated, to get centered throughout their learning opportunities in our district. They start with looking at the compass and talking with each other in the triads about where am I when it comes to thinking about equity and what will it allow me to be centered so that I can stay in this conversation. In order to really look at different perspectives, we have some visuals that they go through and ask, what do you see? As you're looking at this, I'm sure you're all seeing different things. Some see an old woman, some see a young woman, some see an eagle. In this one, what do you see? Different students will see different things first. Some will see more than one thing, some will see multiple things. In this one, which way is he looking? Is he looking forward? Is he looking sideways? And this last one, do we see chess pieces? Do we see people? Do we see both? This is to help us really think about, we can be looking at the same thing at the same time and have a completely different experience than each other. And it doesn't make one less true. It allows us to understand that multiple perspectives can happen and that they all can be true and be in the same space with each other. And how do we hold that? And how do we honor it? In groups, they talk about how does our personal identity impact how we see the world? And how do our multiple perspectives impact how we engage with each other? If I'm unaware that others may see something in a different way, it will be hard to engage with people. It will be hard to have conversations. And this is to help all our students know that your perspective is valid and you don't have to change it to be in conversation, that we can have conversations about all of it. The next part of the lesson is really looking at the 4 agreements from Courageous Conversations. The 4 agreements are to stay engaged, to stay present during these hard conversations, and what is going to allow you to be centered in that compass so that you can stay engaged, to experience discomfort and not run from it, to be able to sit in it, to be able to explore it, to be able to build comfort with discomfort. And speaking your truth, your perspective is valid. And just because someone else's truth is different doesn't make yours wrong. And then expect and accept non-closure. There may not be a resolution, and there can be different outcomes, and everything can still be okay. The biggest thing is I want students to know that their opinion does not have to change. It is okay to have a different view. So these are the anchor agreements. And then part of the module is that they need to develop their own agreements. So when looking at those agreements, which ones are easiest and which ones are harder and why? What will allow you to be able to work through those? And then what are other agreements that you feel are important for you to be able to engage in these conversations over the 6 modules? And then they create a list in their triads on Post-its and do a walk around. And so they can do like a gallery walk and see what everyone has put up and get agreement on, are these things that we can live with, that these things that will work for us? Are there things that we need to change, or do we have questions about them? And then that is how they develop their community norms moving forward for all their sessions. And then we also offered an activity. Because this is not a graded class, we wanted to find ways to engage our students to be able to think about this past the one session. And they could do like a meaningful, reflective video about what they learned from this, what the lesson meant to them. And there's hashtags that they would tag to the videos. And then we were going to provide a gourmet lunch for the winning groups at each school site. And that is lesson 1.
So Lynn, some questions that have come up that I think we can answer live are how, for parent feedback, like how did we get parent feedback on lesson 1? So how do you involve parents in the equity lessons?
I know I reached out to some of the DEI parents, reach out to me regularly, and I was checking in with them. And then I've had some parents who have reached out who were curious about the lessons that I've had some one-on-one meetings with, that I have talked to about the lessons as well.
Yeah, so we do take parent feedback, and I want parents to know, like, if you have feedback or your child had an experience in the class and you think it's important for us to hear about it, Dr. Harris will absolutely make time for you. I would, if you were to give me those concerns, that's fine. I'll answer them if I can, or I'll refer them to Dr. Harris to answer. So we do take parent feedback on it. You know, we do develop these lessons with our wellness. I mean, there's so much teacher input and feedback here. And I don't want to say parents aren't an important part of this process. We'll certainly listen to the experience your student had and your opinion on it. And incorporate that feedback as we can. The other thing, so I'm going to move on to the next question, which is around a definition of equity. What would you say that is, Dr. Harris?
So for the schools, I feel equity means that each student's needs would be met in a way that they could be able to learn and grow at their best. Like, our goal is for every student to be able to have the opportunity to be successful, regardless of whether they have an IEP, whether they have any limitations, whether they have financial barriers, or race, or gender, or sexual orientation, or any other identifier that comes up.
Okay, and pronouns. Can you talk a little bit about why we ask for pronouns? What's the purpose of that?
So one of the biggest reasons for pronouns is to allow for every student, every person within the district to be seen as who they are. So when we use the wrong pronoun for people, they feel othered, they feel not seen as who they are, and it devalues them. This allows them to be able to express who they are and be seen as a whole person.
Okay. done. Got the same question around equity. And I think one of the working definitions we really use around equity is, as Dr. Harris said, is giving students what they need. Not everybody needs the same thing. Not everybody, some students come to school really, I think, balanced and prepared, rarely get off their rocker. If you're a parent and you have more than one child, you know that they can be very different. You wouldn't necessarily treat them both the same because they might react differently to the same thing. So you give them what they need. And that's really when we talk about equity, it is for teachers to see the individuality of children so they can give them what they need to be successful. Some feedback on, using social media and wanting less social media in students' lives, not more. We will take that feedback into account for sure. There are some, I know like Las Lomas, they wanted students to make a poster for this more recent one. So we've heard that feedback as well. So we may do less social media in the future. So thanks for asking that. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to lesson number 2.
Give me one moment.
Sure. And I will say, as we designed lesson 2, we actually designed it and then we went back and we redesigned it after talking to our principals, after talking to some students, after hearing some parent feedback, and really designed it to dig deep into multiple perspectives. We're certainly aware that that's something we have to pay attention to in our district. So take it away, Dr. Harris. Looks like you're ready to go.
I am, but for some reason, it's not going to let me show sound for the video, so I might have to have you do it.
Sure.
It says I have to restart for that.
Okay. Oh, do you want me to show it then? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it said I have to restart the whole computer for the sound part.
Okay, so lesson 2. Here we go.
Thank you. So in lesson 2, one of the things that we received feedback on is lesson 1, because it's set up for a lot more discussion and to allow the discussions to happen. Not everyone made it through all of lesson 1. So at the beginning of each lesson, and the other piece was that students wanted the lessons to connect to each other, to not just do a lesson and never talk about it again. Each lesson will start with a reflection from the last and a prompt for teachers that if you did not make it through lesson 1, this is where you can start with where you stopped. You can reflect with what you did complete and then finish out what you hadn't completed yet before going into lesson 2. Amy and I had talked about that there may end up being a lesson 7 of whatever people haven't gone through with. And we both feel that's totally fine because the students really are getting more out of the discussions with each other. So in this piece, they would be doing a triad activity of thinking about what they remembered and how have they used what they learned. Are there ways that some of that stuff has shown up in their other classes, in their sports, some of the leadership? Students are wanting to use some of this in the way they're leading and the way they're thinking of activities. Then we will check in on the agreements. And there's a prompt for the teachers to add in all the agreements that they came up with as a group. And then the check-in to see if those agreements are still working for them. Is there anything that we need to add as we're about to really talk about bridging our multiple perspectives across the identity of race? Is there something I need that would be different than what I needed when we talk about it?
Dr. Harris, your sound is cutting out a little bit. I don't know if there's something by your computer or not. Yeah, that's better. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's. I'm not sure.
And so then after we go over the agreements from last time, we do a reminder that our focus is going to be around multiple perspectives across race and a reminder of what multiple perspectives show up and how these visuals that we looked at before. And then ask the question, how do I see my own identity in relation to race? And how do I receive perspectives that are different from my own? Am I able to hear different perspectives? What will I need in order to be able to do that? And then we look at the compass again and have them. Oh, and then we define race. And so they defined race last year. And so we use the same working definition. around race is a group of people united or classified together on the basis of color of their skin, facial features, hair, texture, etc. And really being clear that it is not the same as nationality or ethnicity. And ethnicity has to do with culture, religion, family traditions, and celebrations. And that race defines us based on what we look like. So we see someone's race or we code someone's race just by seeing them and never having a conversation. And then we go back to the compass and have everyone really dig into remembering, the goal of our compass is for us to get centered as we really grapple with the discussion around race. And where are we entering this conversation? Are we entering in believing, thinking, acting, or am I my feelings? And how can I get centered? We prompt everyone to know that we're going to see a series of videos that surface different perspectives from within similar racial groups. The whole goal is to be able to see that even if you see 10 Black people, they may see the world very differently than each other. If you see 10 white people, they may see the world very different than each other. We also included multiple race category because that was a real big ask. A lot of the students felt that in the past, they weren't represented, that they are biracial, they have multiple race, and that they weren't seen in the equity video, in the equity lessons. And so paid attention to that. There's also attention to the Latinx community as well. So we're gonna show a couple videos. So as you watch the video, the students are to pay attention to what perspectives are present and how do the people navigate the disagreements. And this first question is, I've tried to hide, it's a statement, and the students or the people in the video move from either neutral to all the way to strongly agree or to strongly disagree. And the statement that they're responding to in this one is, I've tried to hide some of my racial identity.
Some of my racial identity. 3, 2, 1, go. Even throughout high school, I just pretended I was white completely. And there was a time when my dad picked me up from school. It was a whole thing, and people were saying like, oh, your dad's a terrorist. I had never experienced anything like that, or they'd ask me about it. They'd make bomb jokes, and it hurt to hear people saying stuff like that about my dad.
A similar thing happened to me, like when I was in elementary school. My dad came and dropped me off at school, and he's like a dark-skinned Black man, and he's from the hood on top of that. So like he has a certain like aura to him, and a lot of people look at me like, that's your dad? And I'm like, yeah, that's my dad. And they're like, he looks so scary. And I'm like, why does he look scary to you? Why should he look scary to you? And like the only thing that's keeping me away from this strongly disagree is because when I was younger, I just did not accept the Black part of myself. And now I do.
I just want to say, I'm really sorry, like, to both of you that you felt like you've been put in positions to feel like that. That's just like such a terrible thing to tell someone. No, you can't be every part of who you are. These past couple of years, I've been trying to like reconnect with that part because I shoved it down for so long, and it's been really heartbreaking, the amount of notices I missed, and the Ramadans I didn't celebrate because I felt so uncomfortable about that.
I think it's important you're taking the steps though. Personally, I've never tried to hide any part of me. That's always been like the biggest thing for me. Growing up, like I was always proud to be white and I was like proud to be Black. That's just how I was raised, and that's always how I was, and I just wanted to be me. So that's what I did.
The reason I'm on this line is because Western beauty standards suck. They really, really got to me. I would be really picky about how I would do my hair and how I would part my hair. And then when I would post YouTube videos or Instagram posts, I would color correct everything to be really blue so that I didn't look yellow. And it was just like, I didn't want to post a photo of me outside because I thought my eyes looked too Asian. A lot of internalized things that made me hate myself and my appearance. And now I feel much more accepting of being mixed and being everything that I am. But I am here because I have felt like I wanted to hide a part of me because it would have been easier for me.
I agree. Like when I was younger, I used to want to be lighter. I used to get made fun of. I would always get the question, are you adopted? You're not Asian. And it just made me feel so bad about myself that I just was so confused because I didn't fit in any single pocket of anybody in any friend groups. I couldn't hang out with the Chinese kids because they're like, you don't look Chinese. I don't hang out with the Black kids because I don't sound Black. And they say I'm whitewashed. So the whole entire life, I've literally battled with them, like, what the hell am I?
Okay. Do we want to go to, do you want to do the next video for me?
Sure.
Okay.
And then we'll show one more and then we will move on to what comes next.
I live a privileged life. 3, 2, 1.
It's so sad to say because I never say it out loud, but it's the truth, is like getting pulled over by the police. I always feel like I have a little bit of a one-up because I'm white, because I'm a woman. And I feel so bad that that's the truth, but this is a real thing and it's unfortunate.
For me as an individual, I feel like I'm not privileged. Sure, like white people background came from like being higher up on the scale, but I've gone through really hard things before. You know, I don't feel like I'm superior over other people. So as an individual, I don't feel like I'm privileged.
I think privileged, I guess I don't really think that I'm above other people. I just think that naturally I'm treated differently.
Yeah, it's like perception. It's just perceptions.
Yeah, I think that's a huge misconception. I have privilege that I didn't ask for it. It's just society sees me as like the standard for whatever reason. And because of that, I get treated differently. And white privilege, you know, like you said, it's not about what you've gone through or what you experience. It's 100% how the world sees me.
Okay, and then our next video.
3, 2, 1.
You moonwalking, which one? I don't moonwalk.
I agree that I have to friendly around people that aren't Black just because like corporate America doesn't want to hear me talking, doesn't want to hear me speaking in slang, and I am not happy about it. Like I wish that it was different, but I feel like I need to do to fit into that group.
I strongly disagree. I am me wherever I go. I'm a proud Black man and I'm gonna speak my truth every day of the week. If you don't like it, shit, it ain't on me, that's on you. And I feel like it's a disservice to anyone I'm around if I'm not being my authentic self. Because my white friends might want to hang out with me because I'm Black. They want some flavor. So if I go in being something totally different, then
Let's do different things. Let's do different things. One thing is, are you changing yourself or are you changing how you communicate who you are? And I'm changing how I'm communicating who I am, and I still remain the same.
Like, do you have a white voice?
do I have a white voice? I know, Cole, I'm a Black man, trust me. Every Black person growing up in America can code switch.
Then you didn't move a little bit.
But here's the thing. The question was, do I act different when I'm in different surroundings? And no, but see, how would I ever be accepted if I'm always code switching? That means I'm always acquiescing to something else. You see what I'm saying? So in order to be accepted, you got to bring you.
Do you guys, when you say code switch, do you mean you change the actual words you say, or do you mean you change the tone of your voice?
I change how I say it, and I change what I say. I'll walk into a business meeting different than how I walk into the basketball court. So that's me changing to fit the scenario to benefit the end goal. And I don't view that as a negative. I view that as me focusing on what the end goal is.
But I feel like American society has made Black people operate in that fashion, because nobody asks white people to code switch. They can be white in America, China, wherever. They accept it. We're around like Visa. But I'm the only one that has to go around and say, "Oh, hi, how you doing?"
Well, and we'll go to the.
And then there's one more.
Sorry. No, next one. Sorry.
You're good.
I think here we go. Sorry, last one.
The word listening at is offensive. 3, 2, 1, go.
I kind of like have a bigger problem with the word Hispanic. While I'm not in love with the word Latinx, like I really do love that it's inclusive of all genders. I'm waiting for the point where there will be another term because it just doesn't sit right.
So I call myself a Latina. I'm proud to be a Latina. Now, I have very dear friends who are non-binary, and they request that I call them Latinx. Of course, I'm going to honor that. And I am glad that there is a term that they embrace, but I don't think I should have to change mine.
I think people are going to call themselves what they want, and they've been doing that forever. I think it's the fact that when we say Latino or Latina, we are excluding trans people in our language. Like, our language is powerful. And I think that, I know what you're saying, because I've had this conversation with like my parents and my aunts. Like, it's worth a tiny bit of discomfort to include trans people.
So, and after during each of the videos, they're instructed to take notes on the perspectives and how the disagreements, because the videos show that within a racial group, people don't all agree on the same statements, and how they navigated having those disagreements and being able to have conversations across them. And then in triads, they'll talk about what they took notes on, and then in what ways were multiple perspectives present in the videos, and how did the people in the videos navigate those disagreements. And they'll have discussions with each other and be thinking about like how maybe they would have responded and what would have been different for them and how they were feeling about everything. And so they'll do that in small groups and then come back and share out any themes that came up as a large group. And then after that, let's see, I think they'll talk about what would help us as a class feel comfortable talking about race moving forward. So we had these agreements that we set up, and now we're thinking about that we may not agree within a racial group or even across racial groups about different things. And how can we have these conversations moving forward? Is there anything else that we need to do? Is there anything that we should add? Is there something that would allow us to be centered? And then our hope is that we can see either some of the posters or what people submitted from the last lesson, if anyone did. And then our next contest is for people to create a poster that symbolizes something about what they learned in this current lesson. I think it's on the next slide. So each lesson is trying to come up with something else that allows, because not everyone is going to do a video and not everyone creates posters. And so I believe the next one, it'll be like if they want to write a poem or write something that helps someone understand what they learned. But we're trying to find different ways that students can be able to contribute to this. And that is lesson 2. You're muted if you're talking to me.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry, I'm muted. A couple of questions that have come up. One is, do we believe there's an equity problem in the schools that fall under our responsibility? Or is the goal to establish a standard that we should meet at all times? So I do want to answer that because I've heard that question a lot. And I think I would just say, having worked in schools for the last 25 years, part of our responsibility, and you can go to the California Department of Education website and look at equity and inclusion. We are required as public schools to address issues of equity and inclusion. It's not really an option for schools to not engage in conversations around inclusion. It's not an option for schools to not deliberately and intentionally work on safe and inclusive environments. And that's part of this work that we do with the lessons. So I don't think it's around a standard that we use, but what we do look at to measure our progress is a pulse survey that we give to students. There's 9 questions we asked at the end of last year. It's not really specific to say like, do you believe in racial equity, et cetera? It's really like, do you feel a sense of belonging with your school? Do you feel that your school, you get recognized for doing your best work? It's the Harvard Pulse Survey is what we use. It's given to Harvard students every year. We're giving it several times this year, and we're looking at that data as to sort of say, like, how are we meeting this goal of inclusive environments for students. And I'm not saying that these lessons are how we're all meeting that goal, but it's everything that we're doing. As we take a look at our measures of belonging and inclusion, we're required to give the Healthy Kids Survey every year, which measures belonging and inclusion, and how students feel about being on their campus, how safe they feel, how comfortable they feel on campus. Do they believe the school will respond to a problem that they're having? So I think our standard is to really look at those responses and hope that we get 100% of students saying, I feel like school is a place where I belong, where I fit, where I can voice my opinions, where I'm getting my needs met. So I would say that's our ultimate goal, is that all students feel that, but we're using that survey data to kind of measure how we're doing there. One of the questions, and I'll turn this over to Dr. Harris, is just around Instagram and the toxic influence of social media. Maybe a whole unit could be to the dangers of overuse of social media and identity issues.
No, that's a great idea. It's the thing I'm grappling with. I feel like there's so many things that that keep coming up that I think would be helpful for our students and, you know, our community, our district community, and especially around social media. I know last year in the equity lessons, there was one on social media as well. And the idea about using the TikTok and Instagram came from students, and, you know, and I was trying to engage them. And I also hear the worry about the use of it. And so we switched to the posters and everything, you know, and the overall goal of all of these lessons is, from my short time observing the students and hearing, you know, their feedback, is that they feel that they have to respond to everything in one way, or they'll be canceled, or they'll be judged for not thinking the same as everyone else. And so I was trying to find videos, and I had students look through these videos before I put them in the lesson, to show videos that people don't have to think the same way to be able to be in the same space with each other. That it's okay to have your own opinion, and it's okay to think differently. Like, that is normal. Not everyone joining in and thinking exactly the same. And we may never agree on stuff, and that is okay. We can understand each other and we can coexist with each other. It's not, as long as we're not harming each other. Right. And so the hope is that they leave our school district, you know, knowing that they're enough as who they are, and are confident in who they are as they are, before they go out into the world. And so this is just one of the lessons to really help them to think about, I don't have to be exactly like everyone else, and that is okay.
Okay, lots of questions coming in here. Confidentiality in the discussions. Is there an agreement about confidentiality?
That is the hope when they develop their agreements. And, you know, one of the things that we've been asking of the teachers is that they set a container of safety, so that the students, what happens within that group, that becomes their safe place to be able to grapple with a lot of these discussions without it going out into the rest of the school population.
Another question, are you finding that students are really able to voice their varying perspectives? Do they feel censored or silenced because they aren't sure about their thoughts on this topic? How is that handled?
So I hear both. So I have heard from many students that it was facilitated in a way that they were able to have these rich conversations that they didn't know were possible. And then I've had some who are worried about speaking up. And so, you know, one of the things that I'm going to be doing is facilitating some trainings in November to really support teachers being able to facilitate these conversations in a way that allows for students to be able to speak their truth, and to be able to do that without judgment or shame, and be able to learn and grow as a collective.
Okay. Is it possible to identify with any race, since it's possible to identify with multiple genders?
Ask that again.
Is it possible to identify with any race, since it's possible to identify with multiple genders?
Like one person identifying with
multiple
races and multiple genders.
Yeah, or people can identify with a different gender. Can they identify with a different race?
That's come up quite a bit. Like, I can't say that I'm the expert on knowing if you can identify with multiple races. I've been seeing a lot of conversations about that. You can identify with multiple races for sure if you are part of multiple races, and you should be able to be proud of every single one of those. And as with genders, I think the misconception is that people are picking and choosing a gender, and really what's happening is they're letting us all know what their actual gender is. And it's not a choice, it's who they are.
Will you be talking about the reasons for the significant absence of students of certain races in the community?
You mean within our community that there's races that aren't present?
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't come up as much in these lessons. That does come up in a lot of our other lessons, like our ethnic studies and our deconstructing race. That goes over a lot of the stuff around the history of redlining and what has prevented access to certain communities over time and how that has been shifting over time.
Okay. Do you feel that work on talking about race with students has improved relations amongst different racial groups, stayed the same, or caused division?
From what the students are telling me, and I can't go off of my own opinion, I have to go off of the feedback that they're giving me, is that it's making it better for them. They're able to have conversations across race. We have students from various racial groups joining clubs that are different racial groups because they want to be more in solidarity with each other across race. And all the schools are doing that, and that is new, and so I feel like it's helping.
Yeah, and I would say, having done this work for a long time in the community, I do feel that talking about race has actually helped. And I know it's not an easy thing to do, but the more you do it, we talk about it like building up a muscle. The easier it is to talk about race, the more you do it. And so getting students in the habit of practicing it, to be honest, it's in every college classroom that they're going to walk into in America. So there will be students racially different from them. If they're going to a UC or CSU, they'll be in diverse settings, probably more diverse than the ones that they're in here. So we do feel like it's a skill set they need to develop. So I have heard positive feedback from students who welcome the conversation, much more so than students saying we shouldn't talk about these things.
And I have students reaching out like daily, getting on my calendar to come in and deepen their understanding, especially the leadership students, because they want to lead with an equitable lens. They want to make sure that they're not including someone unintentionally. They want to be inclusive. And even one of the schools is shifting how they do celebrations moving forward because they want to make sure that it's inclusive of all mindsets and ways of thinking.
A question came up, Dr. Harris, about videos with Asian Pacific Island participants and perspectives. Were there any videos that we found that were, yes, what about the lack of inclusion of Asian students in the lessons?
I know I needed to find videos that for Asian as well as our Indian as well. I mean, we have Filipino, we have a large diverse population. I know it doesn't feel like it. And then when you look at the data, we actually have representation of quite a few groups. What I struggle with is the lesson is like 50 minutes, which is really 45 minutes, and being able to try to have as much as possible. And they can always be made better.
Yeah, so we'll definitely take that feedback in. Another question, do any of these materials teach kids of different groups to find common ground based on similarities? It seems that focusing on difference could create more division.
Well, I think it does both. So as I'm identifying what's different, I'm also identifying what's the same. And that's the big piece. There's more commonalities across race than within race. And that's one of the things that Dr. Watson was meeting with a bunch of the students on Tuesday and was pointing out. Across race, you have more similarities than within a race. And a lot of times that's lost because we're so focused on the race piece. So as we're talking about and acknowledging that within races, that we have differences there, it allows us to be more open to seeing how we have similarities across.
So question around how are teachers teaching this to students? Teachers may have their own bias, which makes it difficult to have a real open discussion and for all students to feel comfortable. How is that being handled?
So one of the things, like I had said earlier, is that I'm doing 3 2-hour sessions in November to really work with our teachers and then also some community people with building up the ability to be able to facilitate these conversations. First, you have to be able to unpack yourself so that you can hold that piece. And then I'm also working with the admin staff as well as any of the leadership teachers and the TOSAs to help them to be able to support me with helping the teachers on site. And so one of the things that's happening is they're identifying the teachers who want support in the room, and they're partnering up with the teachers who are already skilled to be able to hold these conversations. And so they're doing them as duos. Some of the schools have a lead student who's helping to facilitate the discussions so that the discussions stay rich. And so what we're having them do, we set up hours where they can come in and practice facilitation, or they partner up with a buddy.
Okay. I think we answered this one about, will there be discussions on what students have in common rather than just focusing on difference? And then I will go ahead and answer I've gotten a couple questions on, are the lessons mandatory? And I want to say this, there is not an alternative lesson. So this is what all students are doing in their 4th period extension class. We have the dates of the lessons published. So I'll just say that there is not an opt-out. This isn't a health curriculum where people can opt out. We're open and transparent with you about the dates that we're doing the lessons. This next one, I believe, is October 7th. When is it? I think it's
the 15th.
15th of October. That's correct. Friday the 15th. So we're transparent about when we're doing it. But there isn't like a study hall or anything that students can opt out to go. It's not a health curriculum. And again, I want to speak back to, addressing these issues in schools is something we're called to do and the state of California wants us to do. So there is not an opt-out. There was a concern that the actors in the videos are adults, not teenagers. This might be a bit advanced. And I would say, having worked a long time in schools and been a part of discussions with freshmen to seniors, I think kids are talking about these topics quite a bit. And I think have you ever tried to hide part of your racial identity? I think that question, many of our students, especially, who are of mixed race or biracial, could easily answer that question and would have no problem talking and speaking to it. You'd be surprised at how I would say students are much more open in talking about these topics as it pertains to them and their perspectives than adults are. And sometimes what we have found is sometimes the students are way out ahead in front of the adults and able to name and be very vulnerable about their experiences in a way that sometimes adults are not able to be. So I think kids will really relate to the questions in the videos. They're talking about them on our campuses often.
And I worked with students to identify the videos. So like I found all these videos trying to make sure I met the need, because I met with students several times in August before even putting together the lessons. And I showed some of these videos to see if I was capturing their ask, and especially the video around, I hide my race, and they loved every single one of the videos, and they felt like they were heard and seen. So
and then are we making kids feel bad for living in an affluent area because parents have worked very hard to get where they are? I would certainly say that's not our intent, is to make anybody feel bad for either the skin that they're in, where they live. the schools that they attend. Our schools are wonderfully funded and are amazing places. And this is my 4th district. I would say it's a district that is a wonderful place to go to school. It's a wonderful district to work in. But our goal is certainly not to make students feel bad for being here. I think it's to recognize that, they're having an experience in our schools, and students aren't always having the same experience. And if you were to pull kids out and talk about their different experiences in the school, you would hear different things from students depending on a variety of perspectives, which is part of what this work is about. Our African-American students are not having the same experience that our white students are having. Our white students are not having the same experience that our English learners are having. And that's okay, but we also want to make sure everybody feels included and that they can contribute and that they can participate in these discussions. So it's not about making anybody feel bad. It's understanding that we're all bringing different things. We're all bringing different stories to our classrooms. I don't know if you want to add to that, Dr. Harris.
No, I mean, I live in this community, and the last thing I believe anyone should feel is bad for being able to have the privilege to live in this community. The one piece that I think was getting lost is that only people who are white have privilege. And I know that I have a lot of privilege, and I am not a white person. And so everyone has different privileges. Everyone has different access. And the whole point is for all the students to be able to really find joy in everything about them. Like, I want every student to leave our district feeling good about who they are, not feeling bad or shame for having privilege. So what are we going to do with our privilege? How are we going to utilize it to support other people or provide access? Or what are we going to do with it? There's nothing to be shamed about.
Question, are we going to share future lessons with parents like we have done here with the first 2 lessons?
Yes.
Yes.
That is my promise. A couple of the lessons I'm having students make videos, because my goal is really for our videos to come from our district and not have to use videos from other places. And our students are amazing, and they're able to make some amazing things. And so some of the lessons are going to have student videos moving forward. I've been checking in with some of them to help me to develop some stuff.
All right. We've gotten a nice appreciation here that the students can share their reflections of the lessons, and they look great. So thank you for that compliment. Really appreciate it. This is an interesting one. In this curriculum, are people of European descent referred to as white? Wouldn't it be more accurate to speak of people as Finnish, Swedish, Polish, etc.?
Yes, when we start talking about culture and ethnicity. So when we look at race is really around colorism, right? Like, race are seen as white. Even if someone is from Spain, they're identified as white, even though they're Spanish, even though they have a different culture, they have a different ethnicity. They're not functioning like a Caucasian person from the United States who's just white. And so that is another piece, is like really being clear about race, ethnicity, and culture, because it all gets blended.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's an excellent question. And I really want to say that, that's as we are going to dig into culture and ethnicity. And I think that is where, we want students to share their heritage, their family traditions, who they are. Race is a visual, a social construct. It is not the sum of who we are. We are much more than that. And within race and between races, there is just such a variety of experiences. So we certainly want to make sure that students feel comfortable and open and take pleasure in sharing who they are and what their family traditions are like. Some concerns here about the gender and pronouns. Dr. Harris, I don't know if you want to address that. Like, the pronoun question, I think is something that parents are struggling with a little bit.
What's the question?
Like, how do we as parents stop the pronoun question? Is there, what about the gender discussion going on? Is that harmful for students? Is there an opt-out for the gender discussion?
To opt out of talking about gender, like male, female, non-gender conforming?
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, I think around identity and gender. I would offer this. I think as somebody of my generation, and I'm a Gen Xer, if there ever was one, this is a new conversation for me that students are having, and sometimes I'm surprised by some of the responses that students get, which is really reflective of how I grew up and raised. And as a teacher said the other day, I don't want any kid to ever feel like I'm not calling them or addressing them as they want to be called. And I would say I would offer that. It's worth a little bit of discomfort on my part if it makes a student feel more comfortable. And it's a topic that students are talking about constantly, not just with, not with teachers, with each other on social media, in all kinds of arenas. We will be having a parent presentation in a month or so. We're working with one of our partners, Rainbow Community Center. They do a night on gender. This is just for parents around gender and identity and orientation. And I would encourage parents, if you have a student or a child who's, talking about that and talking about identity, it's a great night to attend. They do a training with parents on what we call SOGI, just sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. It was well attended last year and well received by parents who attended. So if that's a topic that you're having in your family or a discussion, I really encourage you. We'll be putting a notice out just as we did for this event tonight on it. I don't know.
So, and one thing I just want to add is, like, as we talk about equity and we talk about making sure that all students feel like they belong and feel like they can actually learn in our environment, when we do the surveys, one of the population that had like a real sense of not belonging and real sense of othered, and who we're seeing, a lot of needs within our wellness centers are our non-gender conforming, our non-binary students, and they're not feeling seen, and they're in pain from it. And so if we're really looking at equity, we have to pay attention to all students and what is it going to take for each one of them. And even if it's just 4 students from a different culture, ethnicity, if a different sexual orientation, a different cognitive ability, I feel like I need to try to find a way to bridge the gap for even just 4 students, so that is how, like, a lot of the topics are coming up, this is what the students are asking for. So most of everything that I'm putting together, I'm not doing it in a bubble, like in the district office. I'm really meeting with students, like across all 5 schools monthly, and sometimes in interim. And they're really helping me to build these. And it's not just leadership, it's students that are in 9th, 10th, and upper level that are coming together to provide support and feedback with this. And that's who's probably going to be making a lot of the videos. We have PSA type videos being made at all the schools to help all the students understand about the BERT system and the reporting system, because they're worried that students don't know how to utilize it. So now we're going to have student videos of how it's important and how to use it and what they've learned from using the BERT system. And so we're just trying to get creative and get more of the students engaged in a lot of this process. So it's just not a bunch of adults telling them things, that it's really their voices that are showing up in a lot of these lessons.
Yeah. For dates, 2 more questions, and then I think we'll wrap it up. God, more questions are coming in. We will.
I should just stop talking.
Right. In October, the next lesson is on 10/15. Beyond that, the next lesson after that will be in January. And then I think we go February, March, and then April will be our last one. We will put the hard dates out probably in November for the January through April lessons. But yes, you will have advance notice of when the lessons are being taught. Question about the pulse survey results. We did a board presentation August 4th for the pulse survey. If you email me, I'm happy to send you a link to the board document. It's public, it's on our website. If you go to the board meeting, board agendas, go to August 4th, and you can see the pulse survey results in there. It's I think it's a belonging and inclusion topic is the headline, and you can just click on there and see the pulse survey results. A second pulse survey for students, and that was done in May of last year. So we're going to be doing one at the end of October to kind of check in, same 9 questions around belonging, inclusion. Do you feel the school, you get recognized for your best work? These 9 questions, and then I'm sure principals will share their results with their communities, and we'll probably do them in a board presentation. Again, these lessons are for all students. I think I've answered that a couple times. There are a thicket of issues here, many of which we've seen play out at the national and state level. Does the training acknowledge this tension?
There are what?
So the thicket of issues here, does the training acknowledge this tension? We're very aware of the tension out there, I think, among, as we've said, we're trying to hold conversations that in the public sphere are not easily done with adults, with members of Congress, that you see playing out on the media with people screaming at school board meetings, et cetera. We are really trying to teach kids a different way. And I think that starts with our young people around sitting in space and listening to one another in person in 3D versions, talk about our experiences and the things that formed our perspectives. Really, that's the heart of this. We're not pushing an agenda. We're not identifying, but we do address the fact that adults aren't able right now to do it well. We live in a politically charged atmosphere. I'm very aware of that. I'm very aware of there are multiple perspectives in our schools, and some students don't feel safe to voice their perspective. They feel like I might get shut down if I am wondering out loud about something. And that's why with this lesson, we're really trying to take it back to, hey, look at these people. Even within the same race, people don't agree all the time. It's okay to not agree all the time. It's how we sit in space. How did you notice how they navigated disagreement? So we can do the same. We have to be better, model better, I think, than what honestly is modeled to us in the news and on social media and quite honestly in the halls of our government. I think we're coming around to, that's about it, I think. Okay, I think that's it. Hey, I will respond privately to a couple of you that messaged me privately in the chat here, but I do want to say, you can, Dr. Harris, myself, we're not perfect people. We really try to do our best. We take a lot of perspective from students. I was watching Dr. McPhatter-Harris with our leadership students at Acalanes the other day. There's a variety of perspectives in the room, and we are determined to hold all of those and to watch our students grapple with, hey, if I'm leading a discussion and somebody doesn't agree or it's becoming unsafe, like, how do I stop it? How do I interrupt that? I love that students are having these discussions. I love that students are trying to yes, how do I get centered and I'm able to facilitate as a good facilitator and make sure that all the perspectives in the rooms are heard. No one's being hurt by what people are saying. People are responsible for their own feelings, and we're navigating these discussions in really, adult ways. And this is what we want them to do as they grow up. I don't know if you have anything else to offer.
No, I'm scared too, but all I was going to say is the goal isn't to change everyone's mind and their views and their values and their perspectives. The goal is to be okay with having multiple perspectives and just not hurt each other. We should be able to coexist without causing harm to each other, even if we're on two opposite sides of a belief system.
One question that feels like I did not answer the question about teacher bias. Adults can't talk about politics. Do you think the teachers aren't discussing this with their bias?
So here's the thing. Every person has bias, and bias isn't bad. The only thing that gets in the way is if you aren't aware of your bias. Right. So everyone has a bias, And if you're not aware of it, it can do harm. And so our goal is to work with teachers to be able to unpack whatever biases they have so that they can be able to facilitate the discussion. The way that these are set up is, my opinion should not even show up in these lessons. It's really set up to facilitate student discussion, their ability to unpack their own stuff, reflect on their own thoughts, hear each other's thoughts, be okay knowing that mine is different than theirs and we are okay together. And oh my gosh, this person over here, we think the same. And I never would have known that. And that's what was coming up on Tuesday when we were working with a bunch of students who had never interacted with each other. A lot of them found out that they have a lot of things in common and they never would have had a conversation before. So they built some different communities with each other that they wouldn't have had. It's not set up for me to share my beliefs. It's set up, if you saw the questions, for it to just facilitate conversations.
Okay. The best way to communicate with us post-meeting, my email is on the website, at the district office website, and it's amcnamara@auhstschools.org. And
mine's L Harris.
lharris@auhstschools.org. We are here to listen. We understand the multiple perspectives our families hold and our students hold. And I hope that everybody here understands the goal is safe schools for all, where students can voice their opinions, feel included, and we build those inclusive communities that we want to see in our schools. I want every student on that pulse survey to respond, yes, I feel like this isn't a place where I feel my voice is heard and that I feel a sense of belonging, and I feel included in activities. I'm sure you want that for your children, and we want it for all children in the schools. And that's really the purpose behind this work. So thank you so much. We'll post the recording when our tech director comes back tomorrow. He was out today. We'll be posting this no later than Monday, and I'll put it on the front page of the website so people can access it easily. So have no fear. We're not hiding anything. This will be up, and then we'll announce the dates probably in November, December, around the January lesson and beyond. I know Dr. Harris is already working on it. We're gathering feedback. We're playing with it. How is this going to look? So stay tuned for that. And again, we want to remain in dialogue with you and conversation with you. You can email us. We really appreciate your time tonight. I know it's valuable and it's time away from your students and families. So thank you. Thank you so much here. And with that, we'll end the webinar. Good night, everybody.